Hi everybody, this is Rob Windsor, and in this SharePoint developer video, I want to show you how to perform CRUD operations using JSON Light in the SharePoint 2013 REST API. Over the summer, Microsoft released support for JSON Light. It's available in your SharePoint Online tenant, and according to the documentation, it's also supposed to be available in Service Pack 1 on premises. Although I have a couple of Service Pack 1 VMs, and it doesn't seem the support doesn't seem to be there, and I know other people have had similar issues. Now, I haven't installed any CUs after Service Pack 1, so it's possible that the on-prem support is in there. If it's not, it will be in an upcoming CU or Service Pack. So what exactly is JSON Light? Well, as the name suggests, it's a lighter version of the JSON response format we get when making REST API calls from JavaScript. So if you scroll down here, prior to the support for JSON Light, when we made requests from the client side, we needed to include accept header which said application JSON OData equals verbose. And the format of the response looks something like this. So we can see here for this request, and I don't think the document says what exactly the request was, but anyway, the response format or the response packet was about 47K bytes. With the introduction of JSON Light, we can replace OData equals verbose with OData equals minimal metadata. So as the name suggests, or the setting suggests here, the amount of metadata included in the response is reduced, but that means there's a significant reduction in the size of the response as well. We go from, 48K, 47K, down to about 11K. And quite often you don't need the additional metadata, you just need the actual data itself. There's a third option we can use, which is no metadata, and we can see that that breaks the response packet down to about 7K. Now I think you'll either be using this one, minimal metadata, or you'll stick with the traditional OData equals verbose. Now one important thing to note is the schema of the JSON we get when we use OData equals verbose is different than the schema of the JSON we get when we use one of the other two options. They're based on different standards. So if we come back and take a look at OData equals verbose here, we can see we get JSON and then D and then results. This is because it's a collection. And then we have the collection of items, and we can see metadata about each item comes in the underscore metadata element, and so on. If we come down and take a look at the response format for OData equals minimal metadata, we can see we don't have the D element. We have value instead. So value replaces D.results, and we don't have the underscore metadata and so on. So not only do we have a smaller response, but we have a response coming in a different schema. And if you want to take your existing code and move it forward to use JSON Light, you're going to have to make some changes. Let's take a look at a sample application I've written and convert it from using OData equals verbose to OData equals minimal metadata. So here in Visual Studio 2013, I have a SharePoint hosted app. I have a page with a few buttons on it and a place to show some information. And then I have my code behind here. And the first example will be just a regular get. So I'm going to get the lists in the current web. And notice in the accept headers here, or the accept header, I have OData equals verbose. So this is going to return a collection. So the data is going to come back to me in the D.results element. Remember, we saw that when we looked at the OData equals verbose schema. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through that collection and write out the title of each of the lists. So if I get it a full screen here, and let me just go ahead and clear Fiddler. And then actually, let's start up the app first. And this is going to go against my SharePoint Online tenant because I know that has support for JSON Light. and then go through the trust dialog. And let me clear Fiddler one more time here. And then come back to my browser and click Basic Get. So here are the names of the lists. And if we come back over to Fiddler, we should see there's the request. We can see the request information there. And then we come down to the JSON and we take a look here. So there's the d.results. And let me just zoom that. There's the metadata we saw before. And then there's going to be one element in that array for each of the items. So there's only 2 items, so we should see the 2 items here. Now let's take that example and modify it to use OData is equal to minimal metadata instead of OData is equal to verbose. So I'll just close down the running sample, and we'll come back over to here. And I'll find OData is equal to verbose, and I'll change that to OData is equal to minimal metadata. And when I do this change, the response or the data is no longer going to come back in d.results. It's going to come back in an element called value. So I need to change the d.results to be value. And in a get, that's the main change you need to make. Everything else should be the same. So I should still get the title value here and title. So change the OData to equals verbose to OData is equal to minimal metadata. And then if you have a collection, it's data.value. If I didn't have a collection, let's just say, for example, I only got the web. So what I would do here, normally I would say data.d.title to get the title property of the web. So that D wrapper is still there. That's if you're using OData is equal to verbose. If you're changing that to OData is equal to minimal metadata, you just remove the D. Okay, but we don't have a singleton here. We have a collection, so we're going to get the value wrapper here. All right, so let's go ahead and run again. And let's clear Fiddler. And then come back and now do our basic get. So the end user sees the same thing. But here in Fiddler, when we take a look at our response, we can see we're getting now the minimal metadata response. So it's JSON and then value, and then our contents inside of there. All right, so that's an example of a get. Now let's take a look at an example of a create. So coming back to our Visual Studio project, let me just shut this down and come back over here. In the create, we'll create a list. So we'll create a tasks list. To do that, I'm going to make a post request to the list collection of the current site. And I'm going to ask that the response that comes back to me is application JSON OData is equal to verbose. And I'm also telling SharePoint that the body of the request contains JSON in the OData is equal to verbose format. So that's this JSON right here. So within the body, I'm saying that what I want to create is a new list. So I say underscore metadata, type is equal to SP list. And if we come back to the blog post and come up here, we can see that in the underscore metadata, one of the attributes is type. So I'm going to say the type here is a list. And then what kind of list do I want to create? I want to create a task list. And what is the title of the list? The list is called tasks. Okay, so if I go ahead and run this, and then let's clear Fiddler, and come back here and say create list, we should see tasks added. That's the list name. So if we come back over to Fiddler and take a look at that, in the request, I sent up this JSON in the body of the request, and then this JSON came back. So this is the information about the list that just got created. So notice we have the JSON D. This is a singleton. It's not a collection, so there's no results. And then we have the underscore metadata. And in there, the type is SP list. And then there's information about the list itself. And one of the things is the actual title of the list, which we get down here. All right, so now let's convert this example to use minimal metadata. So I'll close down the running sample. And actually, for this to work, I'm going to need to retract the list, or sorry, retract the app. That'll delete it so that the list no longer exists. Clearly, I can't create the list if it already exists. And then I'll come back to our create list code here. I'll go into full screen. And in the two places I have OData is equal to verbose, I'm going to change that to OData is equal to minimal metadata. So now in here I have this underscore metadata, type is equal to SP list. Well, if we go take a look at the blog post, instead of underscore metadata, down here, our metadata comes in a different format, right? So we can see there's an odata.metadata element. And then also inside of the value element, if you look at the individual items, we can see there's a few elements that start with odata dot. So we have odata type, odata ID, odata etag, and so on. So instead of saying underscore metadata, type is equal to, I'm going to use that odata.type element. So coming back to the code, here, I'll change this to odata.type, and this is no longer an object, it's just a value, which is SP list. And then down here, when the request completes, when I'm writing out the title of the list, so tasks added, again, that D wrapper no longer exists, so I need to remove it from here. Right, so change OData is equal to minimal metadata in the two places. Update where the kind of element you want to create, information gets passed. And then finally, if you take any information out of the response, modify that as well. Okay, so let's start the app again. And then go through the trust dialog one more time. And then let's clear Fiddler. And then come back here and click Create List. So we can see tasks added. Come over here, take a look at that request. So again, there's the JSON in the body. And then here is the JSON coming back. So if we come down to the OData section, there we can see the OData type is equal to SP list. That matches that. And then we can see there's a title called tasks. And again, up here, note that there's no D wrapper element as we have when we do OData is equal to verbose. So that's creating the task list. What about creating a tasks item? So let me just go ahead and shut this down. Come back over to here. To create a tasks item, we're going to do something very similar we did with the list. So we'll go to the list collection, and then we'll get the task list, and then we'll get its items collection. Again, we're going to do a post operation. And the body of the post is going to be very similar to what we had with creating the list. So we're going to say, what kind of thing do we want to create? We want to create an SP data tasks list item. So the way this naming convention works for lists, it's sp.data.listName, so this is whatever the name of the list is, and then list item. So if the title of the list was announcements, it'd be sp data announcements list item. If the title of list was Rob, it'd be sp.data.rob list item, and so on. And then we just set the actual attributes of the item as we would in the REST API or client object model or whatever. So the changes here are going to be very similar to the changes we saw in the previous example. So if I just come up here and grab this, we're going to replace underscore metadata with odata.type. And again, this is not an object, it's just a value, which is the SP data task list item here. And then in these two places, we need to change the odata is equal to verbose to odata is equal to minimal metadata. And then down here, when this call succeeds, I don't write out or I don't use this actual data parameter here. So there's nothing we need to change in the call done. So this should add an item into the task list. So let's go ahead and run. And let's clear Fiddler. Let's see, I got a bunch of stuff in there. Let's clear that again. And then click Create Item. So item added. Come over to Fiddler. We can see there's the information about the item I wanted to add. And then here's information about the item that just was added. Again, if we come down to the OData section, we can see the OData type is equal to SP data task list item. And if we actually go to the list itself by copying the base part of the URL to the app web, and then opening up another tab here and adding in /lists/tasks. There we can see the task list with the item we just created. And if we come back over here and create a few more, and then come over here and refresh, we can see there's those new items I just created. So we've taken a look at a get, a create. Now let's take a look at an update. What I want to do is update one of these items. So let's come back to our code and come down here to the update item. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the task list here and go to its items collection and get the first item. Top is equal to 1 says get the first item out of the collection. So we'll get the first item, and when that's done, we're going to take that item and pass it off to this update item function. And again, let's just do the conversion to minimal metadata right here instead of running it as odata is equal to verbose first. So I'll go ahead and change this to minimal metadata. And when I do that, this collection is now not going to be data.d.results. It's going to be data.value. The remainder of this remains the same. And then I come down here, and again, I'm going to change odata is equal to verbose to odata is equal to minimal metadata. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the item ID of the item I'm passing in and go get that specific item by ID from the task list. And then I'm going to update its field values here in the body. So this metadata, we've already seen this, needs to change to this. So I'll just go ahead and grab that code there and come down and replace it here. This stays the same. We've already modified odata is equal to verbose to odata is equal to minimal metadata. Now, when we're doing an update, the way we tell SharePoint whether we want concurrency checking on or not is by setting this if match header. And if we wanted to do a concurrency check, then we pass in the E tag. So the E tag is try that one more time. The E tag is effectively the version number of the item. So coming back to the blog post here, we can see that in the odata verbose example, that the E tag is part of the underscore metadata. So the version number there is 1. And then if we come down to the minimal metadata, we can see that the E tag is an attribute. It's the odata.etag attribute of the element. So we need to change the underscore metadata E tag to the odata E tag. So if I come back to my code, that's going to be done right here. Now, what you might want to do, and this is what I tried first, is to say odata.etag. Oops, sorry, odata.etag. And that actually doesn't work. It says that odata is null, and you're trying to access something off of null. So if you recall, in JavaScript, objects are basically just a set of name-value pairs or a dictionary. So the object I'm currently working with is item. And sorry, I said odata.etag. It should have been item.odata.etag, like that, because item is the object, and then odata.etag is the property, right? But it still says that odata is equal to null. So the way I can get around this is by passing in odata.etag as a string, the key into the dictionary, right? So go find me the property of item whose key is odata.etag. And this will get me exactly what I want. So again, for updating an item, again, we need to change the type here, the way we describe the type. We need to change these two, odata equal to verbose to odata is equal to minimal metadata. And then finally down here, if you're actually using the concurrency check, then you pass in the e tag in using this technique right here. So at this point, if we go ahead and run, let's run our app. And then let's go ahead and open up our task list. So I think I should be able to get it through my history here. There we go. And also, let's go ahead and clear Fiddler. And then come back to our app and click Update Item. And then come back to the task list. We should see the first item is updated. So I'll reload. And we can see that the status is set to in progress. And the percent complete is set to 10. And that is exactly what I'm asking it to do here in the app. So those are some simple examples of how to do get, create, and update using JSON Light. Also how to move your code from using odata is equal to verbose over to odata is equal to minimal metadata. I didn't cover delete, but delete's not that tricky, so I'll leave it as an exercise to you, the viewer. So we have the Office blog post covering JSON Light support, the motivation for it, and showing how to do get. If I can find the time, I'll try to do a blog post which covers the material that I've shown you here in my blog, blogs.msmvps.com/rwindsor. And if you want to keep in touch with me, the best way to do it is through Twitter. So it's twitter.com/RobWindsor. Thanks very much, and have a great day.